Hello my friends, and welcome to the channel for a look at one of the most interesting games that I have played in quite a while. The Forever Winter is a game that just released into early access a few days before making this video, putting you in the shoes of a lowly scavenger trying to scrape out a living by picking up the scraps left behind by warring factions on the battlefields of a forever war, a far future conflict that has been raging as long as anyone can remember. It follows the standard gameplay loop of the survival extraction game, but instead of being set in the abandoned war zones and exclusion zones that we're kind of used to, the Forever Winter is set in a very active war zone. Where a game like Tarkov puts the player into a zone that's sealed off from the outside world, only home to isolated pockets of conflict and small factions, the battlegrounds of the Forever Winter are crawling with everything from basic infantry grunts to main battle tanks, flying drones, attack helicopters, and towering battle mechs. In this ecosystem, you are somewhere near the bottom of the food chain, playing as a scavenger who needs to head out into no man's land and gather whatever they can find to keep themselves and their small band of fellow scavs supplied well enough to stay above ground for another day or two. The mass warfare going on around the maps in the Forever Winter is both one of the most striking visual features of the game and something that works to add a really unique twist to the survival game loop. While the enemies are certainly a threat to the player, you are not their main concern. The different factions are locked in a war with each other, and you barely register on their radar compared to a massive militarized mech walker or a column of tanks. While the larger factions are fighting each other, it creates all kinds of situations for an opportunistic scavenger. You can do things like follow a large force around and pick up the remnants of the loot from units that they've encountered while patrolling. Or you can recon an outpost and pick the perfect time to swoop in and rob the whole place blind when the defenders move to hold off an attack. Once you get yourself slightly better equipped, you can try for some upward climbing of the food chain and become more of a guerrilla raider, setting up ambushes of entire patrols in no man's land with suppressed weapons and IEDs, or mopping up the survivors of a bigger fight after the two sides wear each other down. But you have to be careful because the more you poke the bear, the harder it's gonna poke you back. The AI can sort of size up how big of a threat that they think you are and will respond accordingly. A lightly equipped scavenger picking through the remains of a supply outpost will be sort of tolerated, but once you start taking the fight to the enemy, they'll escalate and send hunter-killer units, mechs, and big patrols to wipe you out. While your mileage may certainly vary, I really enjoy the mental exercise that this game provides. You need to pick your battles very deliberately and use the chaos of the fighting around you to your advantage, which creates a lot of opportunities for quick improvised ambushes and clever little bits of thievery while everyone is distracted by the explosions going on around them. The forever wars of the far future make a great sandbox for this survival gameplay, and the whole thing is elevated massively by the incredible vibes that the artists working on the Forever Winter have managed to bring to the table in the design of this world, the factions, and the lore surrounding the whole setting. This is a grim future, a conventional war that has lasted for generations, fought by desperate factions that have resorted to horrible atrocities, not only against their enemies, but against their own people as well, turning their civilian populace into twisted cyborgs that rush in waves straight into enemy gunfire in a cybernetically induced rage. In the design of the world, you can see a very calculated mixture of industrialized warfare and some almost fantastical elements that I think would feel right at home in the world of something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Right next to a well-dug trench line, you'll run into huge pillars made of human skeletons and smashed cyborg frames, or graveyards with displays of funeral rites and medical bays with evidence of horrible experimentation and torture. One of my favorite maps, the Elephant Mausoleum, is littered with the smoldering hulks of battle mechs that were destroyed in previous fighting. These things just give me the chills for some reason. It feels more like walking through a boneyard of dead mythical beasts than it does walking past charred industrial machinery. It actually kind of reminds me a lot of the mountaintops of the giants in Elden Ring, where you go past the petrified remains of the giants who've been dead for hundreds of years, killed in a battle so old that no one is even left to remember it anymore. Out of everything the game offers, I think the pure commitment to an aesthetic and a cohesive vibe is definitely one of the strongest points of the Forever Winter. If you're even remotely interested in grimdark, far future, forever war fantasy, then this game is going to suck you into one of the most immersive and outright cool worlds that I've ever seen. But of course, nothing is perfect, and while I've avoided getting into the mud so far in this video, the Forever Winter is an early access game with many of the same issues other early access releases face. While there's a pretty sizable amount of game here to play already, it's certainly rough around the edges in some places. However, I would say that even where it is a bit janky, you can generally see the proof of concept that they're going for. For example, the war going on in the background between the AI factions. When it works, it not only looks incredible, but it's also seriously fun to interact with. But sometimes it just sorta doesn't work. Enemies will get stuck on each other, or freeze up near each other, or their pathfinding will break and they'll just walk in circles. It can be incredibly immersive to watch a squad of infantry following behind a mech mopping up enemy patrols. But then when their animations get a little bit janky, the whole fantasy can kind of fall apart. When it all works, it's incredibly immersive, and that gives me a lot of faith that with some tweaking, it can be consistently impressive. See, this is where like I keep saying if the AI just would be consistently like cooler more of the time, like this would be a really cool fight to watch, but instead I think we're just gonna watch this tank shoot it at the waifu lady.
We should be cautious.
Gunplay and character control are probably the overall weakest parts of the gameplay so far, in my opinion. You clip on walls and get stuck on little objects a lot while you're moving about the environment, and when you're scrambling for cover, this can get really frustrating. The guns look pretty good, and they're quite functional in terms of being able to shoot at stuff. You can tell that the first-person animations for the view models in the early stages kind of need some more polish, and the sound of the weapons and feel of the recoil is kinda just barely tolerable sometimes. Shooting stuff isn't really the main driver of this game though, and this whole thing is in really early stages in terms of even being playable, so I think we really should give the devs the benefit of the doubt here. As for the infamous water mechanic that it seems like everyone is dogpiling on, to me it's honestly a non-issue, and I think most of the people ranting about this mechanic just simply did not play enough to realize how quickly you can stack up water and negate this mechanic in a way. I've only played about 8 hours, and I already have 2 months worth of water supplies. It really is not a big deal to get water if you actually play the game past the tutorial mission, and most of the conversation around the mechanic, in my opinion, is just clickbait garbage designed to get views by making it seem like the devs are using it as a retention mechanic. The real elephant in the room right now, though, for me, is definitely the overall performance and FPS stats of the game. To put it lightly, it kind of runs bad, with recommended specs including a 3080 Ti graphics card, which frankly is kind of insane. I have people in my Twitch chat playing on a 4090 and struggling, and my 3080 can barely keep it above 45 frames. This is something that could absolutely make or break the game. But I think it's really pessimistic to just assume that it will always be like this and write the game off because of performance issues. If you're like me and just seriously get hooked on the aesthetics of this game, the performance is something that's easy to look past, especially since the game is purely PvE. And honestly, the amazing visual appeal of the game goes way beyond the maps and the enemies. I seriously love the design of the menus and character portraits in the hideout part of the game where you load out your character, accept quests, and interact with the vendors. Plus, the game does have a slight hero shooter aspect to it with several different characters already available to play, each with their own playstyle, stats, and pretty distinct look to them. So far, I've mostly played as the Shaman, a character with low weapon skills but fast movement and good carry capacity. This guy has been great for quick, sneaky loot runs where you try to avoid big fights and just get in and out. I've also been playing Maskman, who has more HP and can access heavy weaponry with upgraded skills. So you can take heavy machine guns and grenade launchers to wipe heavier units for specific quests, or just to access different loot. There's 3 other characters in the game right now, and the devs specifically said new characters are going to be a big part of the game's continuing content. So between upgrading new characters, completing the many quests that are already in the game, traversing the dynamic battlefield across different maps, and scavenging to keep your supplies topped up, there's honestly a lot to do already here in Early Access. So at the end of the day, I think the Forever Winter has a lot to offer for people who are willing to deal with the early access jank, especially if the setting and atmosphere of the game hits as hard for you as it does for me. I won't hesitate to say there are things about it that need to be fixed before the average player would check this game out and enjoy it, but I think a lot of people will still easily get their money's worth out of the game. But I'm interested to know what you guys think. Does the Forever Winter look like a game you would be interested in? And if so, are you going to follow along with early access or just wait it out for a more complete experience? In any case, I hope you enjoyed this discussion about the game. There's a link to my Twitch stream in the description if you want to come say hi while I'm live. And until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.